If you've ever dreamed of serving ice-cold justice to someone who wronged you, hit that like button, subscribe, and get ready for one of the most calculated revenge stories you'll hear today. Because what happened next wasn't just a breakup, it was a masterclass in turning someone's power play against them. That night, after sending that single-word response, I didn't cry or scream or throw things. Instead, I opened our shared wedding binder, a 3-inch thick monstrosity filled with contracts, receipts, and color-coded timelines, and created a new spreadsheet. Project status: terminated. The first call went to the venue, the Regal Crest Hotel, where we were scheduled to get married in just 3 months. I spoke calmly to the event coordinator, acknowledged the $15,000 non-refundable deposit, and asked for cancellation paperwork. She mentioned almost apologetically that if the date rebooked, 75% could be refunded. I thanked her professionally and made a note on my spreadsheet. One down. Next, the photographer, the florist, the caterer, the band. Each call was polite, final, emotionless. By Friday, every contract in my name was gone. The financial loss hurt. Over $12,000 evaporated into the ether, but it felt cleaner than waiting in emotional limbo. The final step was personal. The engagement ring, a family heirloom from my grandmother that Daniel had proposed with, needed to be secured. I drove straight to the bank and locked it in a safe deposit box. Somewhere in the middle of that transaction, it hit me. He didn't ask for space. He asked for control. And control only works if the other person waits. For weeks passed in a strange kind of silence. I went to work, I came home, I lived my life. I didn't check my phone constantly, didn't wait by the door, didn't wonder what he was doing or who he was with. Instead, I focused on myself, something I hadn't done in years. I rediscovered sleeping through the night without that underlying anxiety that had become my constant companion. Then my phone rang. I let go to voicemail. A text followed seconds later. Claire, I'm ready to talk. I miss you. We can fix this. I'm ready to get back to planning. Call me. I waited an hour before calling back. Not because I was playing games, but because I was finishing a work report. His voice was bright, casual, like I'd been on hold rather than living my life. Claire, I was so happy to see your name. I just needed clarity. We should schedule the menu tasting. Mom's already stressing. There's no tasting, I said. Silence. What do you mean? The venue's canceled. So, is the photographer, the florist, everything? His breath hitched. You canceled everything? You told me not to contact you, I replied calmly. A wedding requires full commitment. You withdrew. I shut it down. Panic bled through his voice. You weren't supposed to do that. That's when I knew. He never thought I'd move on. He thought I'd wait. And the showdown had just begun. I didn't sleep much that night. Not because I was second-guessing myself, but because my nervous system was still catching up to the reality my brain had already accepted. When you end something big, you expect grief to arrive first. What I felt was vigilance, the kind you get after a near-miss car accident. The wreck didn't happen, but your hands won't stop shaking anyway. At 8:03 a.m., my phone buzzed again. We need to talk in person. Open the door when I get there. No please, no can we. Just a command. I didn't reply. I made coffee. I sat on my kitchen counter and opened my laptop. The spreadsheet was still there. Columns neat, color-coded, merciless. Vendor, deposit, refund, policy, status, notes. I stared at the numbers and reminded myself this wasn't punishment. This was risk management. Still, under the calm logic, there was a bruise of humiliation I couldn't ignore. Because he hadn't just asked for a break. He'd done it like I was a subscription. He could pause me, and now he was coming back expecting to press play. At 9:27 a.m., the doorbell rang once, then again, then a sustained push that felt like someone trying to force my life open. I looked through the peephole. Daniel stood in the hallway in a crisp navy jacket that screamed planned. Beside him was Linda Foster. Perfect hair, pearls, sunglasses indoors, her posture already shaped like a courtroom. My stomach tightened. Of course, he brought his mother. Of course, he needed an audience. I opened the door, but kept the chain on. Linda didn't even wait for a greeting. What is the meaning of this childish stunt? She snapped like I'd done her car. Daniel leaned forward, his jaw tight. Claire, unlock the door. No, I said simply. Linda's eyes widened like she hadn't heard that word in years. You can't do this, she said. Do you understand how much this wedding represents? How many people are involved? My friends are flying in. I am aware, he replied. That's why I canceled. Daniel's voice rose sharp with disbelief. You did it to punish me. I did it because you told me to disappear, I said, still calm. So I did. And while I was gone, I did the only thing a sane adult does when their fiancé walks away from an agreement. Linda scoffed. Agreement? This is a relationship, not a business contract. I felt something cold settle in my chest. That's funny, I said, because you both treated it exactly like a business until I applied the same rules. Daniel shoved his fingers through his hair, frustration bleeding into panic. Claire, I said I needed space. Space doesn't mean destroy everything. You didn't say space, I said. You said don't contact me and I'll reach out when I'm ready. That's not space. That's control. Linda stepped forward like the chain was the only thing keeping her from physically entering my apartment and rearranging my reality. You're overreacting, she hissed. My son was stressed. Men get overwhelmed. You women don't understand the pressure. I cut in, voice still low but sharper now. Don't, I said. Don't turn this into a lecture about women and men. Your son chose a break. He chose silence. He chose to leave me holding the obligations alone. Daniel's eyes flashed. I didn't leave you. I needed to sort out my feelings. Where did you go to sort them out? I asked. The question landed like a stone. Daniel's face changed just slightly. Linda stiffened too, her mouth tightening like she suddenly remembered she didn't have the full script. Excuse me, Daniel said. You heard me. I said. You didn't go to your brother's. You didn't go to your dad's. You didn't go anywhere you could have told me about without violating your own no-contact rule. Daniel's throat worked. I went away, he said quickly. With who? I asked. His gaze flicked to the side. A tiny tell. Then he said too fast. With Connor. A guy's trip. Connor. A friend I'd met maybe twice. The name felt pasted on. Linda jumped in before I could respond. This is none of your business, she snapped. And that was the moment my suspicion went from a hunch to a certainty. Because if Daniel had gone on a normal trip, Linda would have used it as a weapon. He was clearing his head. He was suffering. He was doing the responsible thing. Instead, she shut it down. That's what you do when the truth is inconvenient. I nodded slowly like I was filing that detail away in a folder labeled lies. Okay, I said again. Daniel blinked. What? Okay, I repeated. You went away. You sorted out your feelings. Now you're back, and I'm telling you, this project is closed. Linda's voice went nuclear. You'll call those vendors right now and reverse this. I can't, I said. The hotel date has already been rebooked. Daniel froze. What do you mean rebooked? It's an October Saturday, I said. They don't sit on those dates. A corporate event sucked in a breath like she'd been slapped. No, she said, voice trembling with anger. No, that is impossible. That hotel knows who we are. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was absurd. The hotel doesn't care who you are, I said. They care who pays, and the contract was in my name. Daniel's face paled. You didn't even talk to me. You told me not to, I said. The hallway went thick with silence for half a beat. Then Daniel surged forward until his face was inches from the chain. Unlock the door, he said low. We're fixing this. We're not fixing anything, I replied. You're picking up your things. Linda's eyes widened again. His things, she repeated, outraged. This is his home, too. It's my lease, I said. He moved in when we got engaged. His name is not on the paperwork. Daniel's voice cracked. Claire, what are you doing? I felt the first real wave of emotion rise. Not sadness, not longing. Disgust. Because this was the moment he expected the old Claire to appear. The accommodating one. The one who smoothed things over. The one who apologized when she didn't even know what she'd done wrong yet. But I didn't feel like that woman anymore. Well, I should have done the day you sent that text, I said quietly. Linda's lips curled. So, you're throwing away 4 years because he had a moment of doubt. You know how ridiculous you sound. That's the thing, I said. It wasn't doubt. Doubt is when someone comes to you and says, "I'm scared. Can we talk?" Daniel swallowed. This was a dismissal. I continued. A pause button. A test. Daniel flinched at that word. A test. Linda scoffed. But I wasn't talking to her. I looked at Daniel. "You didn't break up with me," I said. "You put me on a shelf, and you assumed I'd stay there until you decided if I was still worth marrying." Daniel's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Linda snapped, furious. "You're going to give us back the deposit money," she said. "At minimum, you will reimburse our losses." I blinked slowly. "No," I said. Linda's face went red. Daniel tried again, softer now. "Claire, listen. You're hurt. I get it, but we can salvage this. We can move the date, find another venue." "That's not the point." I cut in. "The point is I can't marry someone who thinks commitment is optional." A muscle jumped in Daniel's cheek. Linda stepped in like a general, taking the floor. "My son proposed to you," she said. "He chose you. Do you realize how many women would?" "Stop," I said. Linda paused. "I don't care how many women would accept scraps," I said. "I'm not one of them." The air in the hallway crackled. Then Daniel's voice dropped sharp with a different angle. "Now my ring," he said. I stilled. There it was. "Not us, not sorry, not I miss you." "The asset. Give it back," he demanded. "You can't just keep it." I exhaled slowly through my nose, keeping my voice level. "You mean my grandmother's ring?" Daniel frowned. "I proposed with it." "You proposed with it because my grandmother left it to me," I said. "It's my family heirloom." Linda leaned forward like she smelled blood. "It was given as a gift," she said. "It belongs to my son now. Technically, he placed it on your finger." "A conditional gift," I said. "The condition was marriage." Daniel's eyes narrowed. "That's not a thing." "It's a very real thing," I said. "And either way, it's not here." Linda snapped. "Where is it?" "In a safe deposit box," I said. Daniel's face twisted. "You locked it away?" He spat like I'd committed a crime. I met his eyes steadily. "Yes," I said, "because I knew the moment you came back, you would treat it like leverage." Linda's mouth opened in outrage. "You're calling my son manipulative." "I'm calling him predictable," I replied. For the first time, Daniel looked truly rattled. Not angry, not offended, afraid. Because he could feel the power shifting, and he didn't know how to stop it. Linda recovered first. She always did. She pointed a manicured finger at the chain like it was the obstacle between her and the life she felt entitled to. "You will regret this," she hissed. "We will get lawyers. We will ruin you." Daniel's voice came in quick, desperate. "Claire, just open the door. Let's talk like adults." I stared at him, and I realized something that made my stomach go cold. He still believed I'd fold if he sounded reasonable. He still thought he had access to me. I shook my head once. "You had 4 weeks to talk like an adult," I said. "You chose silence." Then I added quietly, pointedly, "And you chose something else, too." Daniel froze. Linda's eyes flicked to him fast, suspicious. Daniel's jaw tightened like he was trying to hold a secret in place with sheer force. I didn't push. Not yet. Because the truth was going to matter most when they were already desperate. I slipped my phone out of my pocket and held it up. "I'm going to say this once," I said. "Text me a time you want to pick up your things. I'll have them boxed. You'll collect them from the building lobby." Linda scoffed. "He's not leaving." "He is," I said. Daniel's breathing changed. A subtle shift. He was realizing he might lose the apartment, the wedding, the story he'd been rehearsing in his head where he returned and I cried and forgave him. He swallowed hard. "You're really doing this?" he whispered. "Yes," I said. Linda's face hardened. "Fine," she said. "Then we'll do it the hard way." She spun on her heel and started toward the elevator like she'd already drafted the lawsuit in her mind. Daniel hesitated, his gaze still on me, as if he was waiting for a crack. A plea, a tremble, but my face stayed still. Finally, he stepped back. Then, right before the elevator doors closed, Linda fired her final shot. "You will not find someone better than my son." The door shut. The hallway went silent. I slid the chain off and locked every bolt anyway. Then, I leaned my forehead against the wood and let the tiniest tremor run. Through me, just enough to remind myself I was still human. That was the confrontation. But it wasn't the war because by noon, the dirty tactics began. I was halfway through a status meeting the next morning when my phone vibrated again. Not a text, not a call, an email notification from HR compliance. Subject, confidential matter. Immediate attention required. My stomach dropped, not with panic, but with recognition. Because when people like Linda don't get their way, they don't argue louder. They escalate sideways. I excused myself from the meeting, closed my office door, and opened the email. An anonymous complaint had been filed through the ethics hotline. It claimed my unstable personal situation was creating a toxic work environment. It questioned my emotional fitness to manage high-risk projects. It implied I was distracted, volatile, unreliable. I read it twice, then a third time. Then I exhaled slowly and felt something snap into place. Not fear, not anger. Resolve. This wasn't about heartbreak anymore. This was an attempt to ruin my career. I forwarded the email to my director and requested a meeting immediately. Within an hour, I was sitting across from HR and leadership. My hands folded neatly on the table. I didn't cry. I didn't defend myself emotionally. I laid out facts. I believe this complaint is retaliatory, I said calmly. It coincides exactly with the termination of my engagement. My former fiancé and his mother were explicit about ruining me when I enforced boundaries. I provided a redacted timeline, the breakup text, the 4 weeks of silence, the cancellations, the confrontation. My work record spoke louder than anything else. 5 years, 0 incidents, consistent promotions, strong peer reviews. The HR manager nodded slowly. "We're required to investigate," she said. "But this reads personal." I knew what she meant. This wasn't concern. It was spite. By the end of the meeting, the tone had shifted. "We're suspicious of the complaint." As I left the room, something settled in my chest. Daniel and Linda thought they were rattling me. What they'd actually done was confirm I was right to walk away. That afternoon, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was an email from Linda, except it wasn't sent from her account. It came from Daniel's father, Richard Foster. Subject line, regarding outstanding financial matters. I opened it. The tone was formal, artificially calm. They demanded reimbursement for their share of all lost wedding deposits, plus additional compensation for severe emotional distress and public embarrassment. I laughed out loud, not because it was funny, but because it was delusional. They wanted me to pay for the consequences of Daniel walking away. I forwarded the email to Marion Thompson, the attorney I'd already consulted after the hallway confrontation. Her reply came back within 20 minutes. "This is harassment. Do not respond directly. I'll handle it." 2 hours later, the absurdity escalated. A courier showed up in my building with an envelope. Inside was an itemized invoice totaling $28,450. They had retroactively charged me for backdated rent for Daniel living in my apartment, a $5,000 interior design consultation for furniture he didn't even like, a $10,000 fee for emotional support and household coordination. At the bottom, a demand for the engagement ring valued, according to them, at $40,000. I stared at the paper, stunned. They weren't grieving. They were rewriting history, turning our relationship into a service contract where I owed them. Marion called me that evening. "This is amateur intimidation," she said dryly. "But we're not ignoring it." That's when she found it. Daniel had registered a new event styling business using my apartment address as the official business location. Without my knowledge, without permission. My pulse slowed because suddenly the game changed. Marion drafted a cease and desist letter that was surgical. "We're suspicious of the complaint." As I left the room, something settled in my chest. Daniel and Linda thought they were rattling me. What they'd actually done was confirm I was right to walk away. That afternoon, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was an email from Linda, except it wasn't sent from her account. It came from Daniel's father, Richard Foster. Subject line, regarding outstanding financial matters. I opened it. The tone was formal, artificially calm. They demanded reimbursement for their share of all lost wedding deposits, plus additional compensation for severe emotional distress and public embarrassment. I laughed out loud, not because it was funny, but because it was delusional. They wanted me to pay for the consequences of Daniel walking away. I forwarded the email to Marion Thompson, the attorney I'd already consulted after the hallway confrontation. Her reply came back within 20 minutes. This is harassment. Do not respond directly. I'll handle it. 2 hours later, the absurdity escalated. A courier showed up at my building with an envelope. Inside was an itemized invoice totaling $28,450. They had retroactively charged me for backdated rent for Daniel living in my apartment, a $5,000 interior design consultation for furniture he didn't even like, a $10,000 fee for emotional support and household coordination. At the bottom, a demand for the engagement ring valued, according to them, at $40,000. I stared at the paper, stunned. They weren't grieving. They were rewriting history, turning our relationship into a service contract where I owed them. Marion called me that evening. This is amateur intimidation, she said dryly. But we're not ignoring it. That's when she found it. Daniel had registered a new event styling business using my apartment address as the official business location. Without my knowledge, without permission. My pulse slowed because suddenly the game changed. Marion drafted a cease and desist letter that was surgical. It demanded immediate removal of my address from all business filings, required written proof within 15 days, declared all business mail would be returned to sender. It reaffirmed the ring as a non-negotiable conditional gift, attaching a certified appraisal valuing it at $14,000, and noted their inflated claim could constitute fraud. It documented every act of harassment, emails, the HR complaint, the invoice, and it gave Daniel 10 days to schedule a supervised pickup of his belongings from the building's loading dock. No negotiation, no access to me. When Richard replied, his tone was suddenly conciliatory. "This has gone too far," he wrote. "Let's just return the ring and move on." I responded once. "Your family attempted to sabotage my career, besiege my home, and tried to extort me. This is now handled by counsel. The ring is not negotiable." He never replied again. Pickup day was set for Saturday. I spent the week packing every trace of Daniel's life, methodical, detached. As I sealed the last box, something strange happened. My apartment felt quiet. Not empty, mind. They thought pressure would make me fold. They didn't realize I'd already let go. And once you do that, there's nothing left to take from you. 3 months. That's how long it took for the noise to finally die. Not with a bang. Not with a courtroom showdown, just silence. Pickup day came and went without drama. Daniel didn't show. 2 movers arrived instead. Middle-aged, efficient, uninterested in the emotional wreckage attached to the 27 boxes they hauled out of the loading dock. I watched from the lobby, hands in my coat pockets, feeling oddly detached. He couldn't even face me, and somehow that told me everything I needed to know. After that, the threats stopped. The cease and desist worked better than I expected. The fraud implications scared them. The business address issue panicked Daniel because it wasn't just embarrassing. It demanded immediate removal of my address from all business filings, required written proof within 15 days, declared all business mail would be returned to sender. It reaffirmed the ring as a non-negotiable conditional gift, attaching a certified appraisal valuing it at $14,000, and noted their inflated claim could constitute fraud. It documented every act of harassment, emails, the HR complaint, the invoice, and it gave Daniel 10 days to schedule a supervised pickup of his belongings from the building's loading dock. No negotiation, no access to me. When Richard replied, his tone was suddenly conciliatory. "This has gone too far," he wrote. "Let's just return the ring and move on." I responded once. "Your family attempted to sabotage my career, besiege my home, and tried to extort me. This is now handled by counsel. The ring is not negotiable." He never replied again. Pickup day was set for Saturday. I spent the week packing every trace of Daniel's life, methodical, detached. As I sealed the last box, something strange happened. My apartment felt quiet. Not empty, mind. They thought pressure would make me fold. They didn't realize I'd already let go. And once you do that, there's nothing left to take from you. 3 months. That's how long it took for the noise to finally die. Not with a bang. Not with a courtroom showdown, just silence. Pickup day came and went without drama. Daniel didn't show. 2 movers arrived instead. Middle-aged, efficient, uninterested in the emotional wreckage attached to the 27 boxes they hauled out of the loading dock. I watched from the lobby, hands in my coat pockets, feeling oddly detached. He couldn't even face me, and somehow that told me everything I needed to know. After that, the threats stopped. The cease and desist worked better than I expected. The fraud implications scared them. The business address issue panicked Daniel because it wasn't just embarrassing. Week later, HR formally closed the complaint. Malicious and unsubstantiated, the email read. No disciplinary action, no mark on my record. If anything, it strengthened my standing. My director later told me he admired how calmly I handled the situation. Daniel tried to spin the breakup socially. According to mutual acquaintances, he told people I'd gotten cold feet and abandoned him over stress. The story didn't last. One of Linda's close friends happened to be married to a senior executive at my company. He'd heard about the anonymous complaint. He'd watched my performance stay steady. The pieces didn't fit. The truth leaked out quietly at first, then all at once. For people obsessed with image, public inconsistency is fatal. Financially, the fallout crushed them. Non-refundable deposits. The designer suit Daniel bought for the rehearsal dinner Linda had already paid for. 6 groomsmen outfits ordered and never worn. Tens of thousands gone. Daniel's event, styling business collapsed before it launched. Clients don't trust someone whose professional address is their ex-fiancé's apartment. Last I heard, he moved back in with his parents. The final truth came from an old college friend. He'd seen Daniel at an airport during the 4-week break. He wasn't with friends. He was with his ex, the woman he'd always described as toxic, the one he swore he'd never go back to. The realization hit softly but settled deep. The break wasn't for reflection. It was a test drive. He wanted to see if his old life still fit, while keeping me on standby as the safe option. When it didn't work, he came back expecting forgiveness. Instead, he found consequences. My life is quiet now. The $12,000 loss still stings, but I call it a liberation fee. I sold a rug Daniel insisted on buying and replaced it with one I actually like. My grandmother's ring is still in the bank. It doesn't feel cursed anymore. My cousin just got engaged. Young, in love, scraping by. I gave him the ring. Let it. Start a story built on mutual choice, not entitlement. The revenge wasn't loud. It was precise. He asked for no contact. So, I gave him a world of silence. They thought they could bully me into submission. They forgot something important. They weren't dealing with an emotional mess. They were dealing with a project coordinator. And when a project is doomed, you cut losses. You document everything. And you move forward. My next project is me. And for the first time in years, the future looks bright. Looking back, I realized that Daniel's text wasn't just a breakup message. It was a gift. It revealed the truth about our relationship and about him. Sometimes the most painful moments are also the most illuminating. They show you who people really are when the pressure is on. And they show you who you are when you stop trying to please everyone else and start prioritizing your own well-being. The revenge wasn't about hurting Daniel or his family. It was about reclaiming my power, my dignity, and my future. And in doing so, I discovered a strength I never knew I had. The silence that followed the departure of Daniel's 27 boxes was a strange and potent thing. For 4 years, my life had been a symphony of noise, most of it composed by other people. The constant hum of Linda's opinions, the varying decibels of Daniel's moods, the logistical cacophony of wedding planning, the ever-present background music of compromise. Now, there was just the gentle hiss of my building's radiator and the distant city sigh of traffic. It was quiet, too quiet. The kind of quiet that makes you realize how loud your own thoughts can be when they're not being drowned out by someone else's demands. I walked through my apartment that evening, not with the triumphant stride of a victor, but with the cautious steps of an archaeologist examining a newly discovered ruin. My ruin. His toothbrush was gone from the holder, leaving a faint water stain. His side of the closet, once a chaotic explosion, of expensive suits and forgotten gym clothes, was now just a row of empty wooden hangers, looking like skeletal remains. The space where his giant, ridiculously comfortable leather armchair had sat was a pale rectangle on the hardwood floor, a ghost of his presence. I should have felt elated. I should have poured a glass of expensive champagne and danced in the empty space. Instead, I felt a profound, unsettling emptiness. The adrenaline that had carried me through the past month, the calculated calls, the confrontations, the legal maneuvering, had finally worn off, leaving behind a bone-deep exhaustion and a question that echoed in the quiet rooms. Now what? The answer, as it turned out, wouldn't come from me. It would come from them, in one final, desperate attempt to pull me back into their chaotic orbit. It was a Tuesday night, almost 2 months to the day since Daniel's initial text. I was curled on my new sofa, a soft, gray sectional that was entirely mine, reading a book for the first time in what felt like a decade. My phone buzzed on the coffee table, an unfamiliar number flashing on the screen. I almost ignored it, assuming it was another spam call, but something, a lingering instinct, a whisper of the project coordinator in me, made me pick up. Hello. The voice on the other end was hesitant, older, and laced with a kind of weary formality. Claire Whitmore. Speaking. Claire, this is Richard Foster, Daniel's father. My spine went rigid. I hadn't heard from Richard since his laughable demand for reimbursement, a message my lawyer had swiftly dispatched. My first thought was that this was another tactic, another attack from a different angle. I braced myself, my voice cool and distant. Mr. Foster, if this is regarding the legal matters, you'll need to direct all communication to my counsel, Marion Thompson. There was a heavy sigh on the other end, the sound of a man defeated. No, Claire, he said, his voice dropping the formal edge, replaced by something that sounded suspiciously like genuine fatigue. This isn't about that. I'm calling because I need to talk to you. Not as Linda's husband, not as Daniel's father. Just man to man. Or, well, man to you. I was silent, my mind racing. This was a new play. The good cop. The reasonable patriarch. I wasn't buying it, but I was curious. Why would I want to talk to you? The question hung in the air. I could hear him breathing, could almost picture him in a sterile, masculine study, surrounded by leather-bound books and the scent of old money and regret. Because I think you deserve to know the truth, he said quietly. And because I think my wife and my son have lost their minds. And I'm tired of it. That got my attention. I sat up straight, the book forgotten in my lap. The truth about what? About the break, he said. About where Daniel really was. And about why he came back. My heart gave a single, hard thump against my ribs. This was the missing piece. The detail I'd sensed in the hallway. The secret Linda had tried to shut down. I'm listening, I said, my voice barely a whisper. It wasn't a guy's trip with Connor, Richard began, and the words tumbled out like a confession. He went to see his ex-girlfriend, Sarah, the one before you, the one he was with for 6 years, the one who, according to him, broke his heart. I closed my eyes, a cold wave of validation washing over me. The hunch was right. The lie was real. He told me he was going away to clear his head. Richard continued, his voice laced with a father's disappointment. But I knew. I saw the plane tickets. One way to Denver. He didn't go to think, Claire. He wanted to see if he could get her back. He wanted to see if the life he thought he'd missed out on was still available. The silence in my apartment was suddenly heavy, filled with the weight of his words. He wasn't just testing me. He was trying to trade me in. Why are you telling me this? I asked, my voice steady despite. The tremor in my hands. Because it blew up in his face, Richard said, a bitter laugh escaping his lips. Sarah wanted nothing to do with him. She's married now, has a kid. She told him he was manipulative and self-centered, and that she was happier than she'd ever been. He came back a week later, defeated, with his tail between his legs. And Linda saw him as a victim. She saw his failure to win back his ex as a deep wound that needed to be soothed. And the soothing, in her mind, was coming back to you, the safe, reliable option, the one who would fix everything. The contempt in his voice for his own wife was palpable. When you didn't play your part, when you didn't just welcome him back with open arms, she saw it as an attack on her son, and an attack on her. Everything that happened after, the HR complaint, the invoices, that was all Linda. She's obsessed with control, with appearances. She saw you as a loose end that needed to be tied up, a problem that needed to be managed. I tried to talk to her, to tell her to let it go, but she wouldn't listen. And Daniel just let her do it. He's always let her run his life. I leaned back against the cushions, the pieces clicking into place with a horrifying, crystalline clarity. It wasn't just about Daniel's weakness. It was about Linda's pathology. So why call me now? I asked. Because it's destroying them, he said, and for the first time, I heard a flicker of something other than coldness in his voice. Fear. The business filing, the cease and desist. Marian Thompson is efficient. The threat of a fraud charge over the business address. That scared Daniel. He's 34 years old, and he's moving back in with his mother because he can't afford his own apartment. The wedding deposits are gone. Linda is furious, humiliated. She's alienated her friends, who all know what happened. She's lashing out at everyone, including me. This house has become a war zone, and I'm done. He paused, and I could. Hear him take a deep breath. I'm not asking for your forgiveness, Claire. God knows my family doesn't deserve it. I'm calling to apologize and to tell you that you were right. About everything. You handled this with more grace and strength than anyone I've ever seen. And I'm sorry you had to. The apology was unexpected. It was a single, quiet note of sincerity in a symphony of manipulation. I didn't know what to do with it. Thank you for telling me, I said, my voice soft. Is that all? No, he said. There's one more thing. The ring. Linda is still obsessed with getting it back. Not for Daniel, but for her. She sees it as a prize, a symbol of victory. She's planning something. I don't know what, but she's not going to let it go. I wanted you to be aware. The warning was a gift, a final piece of intelligence from a defector behind enemy lines. I appreciate the warning, Mr. Foster, I said. And for what it's worth, I hope you find some peace in that house. He gave a short, sad chuckle. I think I'll need to move out for that. Take care of yourself, Claire. You too, Richard. And with that, the call ended. I sat in the quiet for a long time, the phone resting on my chest. The truth hadn't set me free, not exactly, but had closed the door. It had transformed a lingering, nagging uncertainty into a solid, undeniable fact. I wasn't the second choice. I was the backup plan, and that knowledge wasn't a wound. It was armor. True to Richard's warning, Linda was not finished. A week later, a certified letter arrived from a law firm I didn't recognize, one that clearly specialized in aggressive, high-stakes litigation. It wasn't another demand letter. It was a lawsuit. They were suing me for the return of the engagement ring, claiming it was an unconditional gift and that I was unlawfully withholding property. They were also suing for the $28,450 they had invoiced me for, framing it as a breach of a verbal cohabitation agreement. It was audacious. Was ridiculous. It was, I realized with a jolt of adrenaline, exactly what I needed. Marianne called me the moment she was served with her copy. Well, she said, her voice a mixture of disbelief and glee, they've really done it now. They've just handed us the keys to the kingdom. I didn't understand. How was this good? This means court and lawyers and discovery, she finished for me, her tone sharp with excitement. Claire, they've opened the door to legal discovery. We can now subpoena their financial records, their text messages, their emails. We can build a case not just for why we should keep the ring, but for why their entire lawsuit is a malicious, retaliatory act of harassment. We can expose them. A slow smile spread across my face. This was it. The final project. The ultimate risk mitigation. This wasn't just about defending myself anymore. This was about going on the offensive. Let's do it, I said. Let's burn it all down. The next few weeks were a blur of legal strategy. Marianne was a master tactician. She didn't just want to win. She wanted to dismantle their case piece by piece and use those pieces to build a fortress around me. The first step was the ring. We didn't just argue it was a conditional gift. We commissioned a full historical report and a new, even more detailed appraisal. We had my grandmother's will, which specifically bequeathed the ring to me. We had photos of me wearing it as a teenager, long before I ever met Daniel. We established, beyond any shadow of a doubt, that the ring was my property, which Daniel had been given permission to use for the proposal. It was a devastating piece of evidence. Then came the discovery process. Marianne's subpoenas were surgical. We requested all text messages between Daniel, Linda, and Richard from the past 6 months. We requested their bank statements to show they hadn't actually paid for any of the wedding deposits I had lost. We requested the LLC registration documents for Daniel's failed business. And then we requested the one thing we knew would be the smoking gun. Daniel's phone records and travel itineraries for the 4 weeks he was on his break. The response from their lawyers was immediate and panicked. They filed motion after motion to quash the subpoenas, claiming privacy, irrelevance, and harassment. But Marianne was ready. She argued, forcefully and successfully, that since they were the ones who made the nature of the relationship and the break central to their lawsuit, Daniel's activities during that time were entirely relevant. The judge agreed. The day the documents arrived was one of the most satisfying of my life. It was a treasure trove of their own undoing. There were the text messages between Linda and her friends, where she called me ungrateful, emotionally unstable, and a gold digger who got what she deserved. There were the emails between her and the lawyer, where she strategized on how to apply pressure and force her to crumble. And then there were Daniel's travel records. A round-trip ticket to Denver, a hotel reservation for 2 under his name, and, buried in his phone bill, a string of calls to a number I didn't recognize, a number that a quick search revealed belonged to one Sarah Jennings of Denver, Colorado. The evidence was overwhelming. It was a perfect, documented case of manipulation, deceit, and retaliatory harassment. Marianne was practically giddy. They have no idea what's coming, she told me during a strategy session. They thought this would scare you into settling, into giving them the ring and paying them off to make it go away. They never imagined you would fight back, and they certainly never imagined you would be so good at it. The plan was simple. We wouldn't just respond to their lawsuit. We would file a countersuit for malicious prosecution, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and harassment. We would present our evidence not just to a judge, but in a preliminary hearing where they would have to face it, in person, with us in the room. The day of the hearing arrived. I walked into the courthouse not as a victim, but as a witness. Marianne was by my side, a formidable presence in a sharp navy suit. On the other side of the aisle sat Daniel, Linda, and Richard, along with their 2 lawyers. Daniel looked pale and thin, the confident charisma completely erased, replaced by a sullen, trapped expression. Linda, however, was still in full battle mode. Her hair was perfect, her suit was expensive, and she stared at me with a look of pure, unadulterated hatred. Richard just looked tired, his shoulders slumped in defeat. The hearing was closed to the public, just to us, them, and the judge. Marianne was magnificent. She didn't just present our case. She told a story. She started with a breakup text, framing it not as a cry for help, but as a cold, calculated act of control. She laid out the timeline of my cancellations, showing them to be a logical response to Daniel's unilateral termination of the engagement. Then she brought out the big guns. She introduced the evidence of their harassment, the HR complaint, the invoice, the lawsuit itself. And then she dropped the bombshell. "Your Honor," she said, her voice ringing with authority, The plaintiffs claim my client wrongfully terminated their relationship. However, evidence suggests the plaintiff, Daniel Foster, had already abandoned the relationship for another. She handed the judge the travel records. During the 4-week break, he requested, Mr. Foster flew to Denver to reunite with his former girlfriend, Sarah Jennings. When that attempt failed, he returned, expecting my client to be waiting as his fallback option. Daniel's head shot up, his eyes wide with panic. Linda's face went from angry to ashen. Richard just stared at his hands. Marianne continued, relentless. When my client refused to be treated as a consolation prize, the plaintiffs, led by Linda Foster, embarked on a campaign of intimidation and harassment designed to ruin her personally and professionally. They filed a false report with her employer, sent fraudulent invoices, and finally filed this frivolous lawsuit in a last-ditch effort to bully her into submission. She looked directly at Linda. This isn't about a ring. This is about control. And my client refuses to be controlled by them any longer. The judge listened intently, his expression unreadable. When she was finished, he looked over at Linda and Daniel's lawyers, who were frantically whispering to their clients. Counsel, the judge said, his voice stern, the evidence presented by the defense is compelling, to say the least. This lawsuit appears to be baseless and retaliatory in nature. I am strongly inclined to not only dismiss it with prejudice, but to refer this matter to the State Bar for review of potential ethical violations. And, he added, looking directly at Linda and Daniel, I will be signing the order for the defense's countersuit to proceed. You will have a lot to answer for. The gavel came down with a sound that echoed like a gunshot. It was over. Linda let out a small, choked sound like a deflating balloon. Daniel just looked broken. He finally looked at me, not with anger or demand, but with a flicker of something else. Regret. But it was too late for regret. It was about consequences. It was about showing them that actions have reactions, that manipulation has a price, and that you can't treat people like disposable assets without eventually having to pay the debt. The most satisfying part wasn't seeing them defeated. It was seeing the truth, undeniable and documented, laid bare for everyone to see. In the end, the facts were my greatest weapon, and the truth was my ultimate revenge. If that final courtroom takedown sent a shiver down your spine, you know what to do. Smash that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and dive into the comments below. Let us know what you think was the single most devastating piece of evidence in Claire's case. Was it the travel records? The text messages? Or was it the quiet, undeniable power of her documentation? Your stories and your theories are the best part of this channel. Thanks for watching, and remember, in a world of chaos, the truth is your most powerful weapon. Stay sharp.